This program is brought to you by the Center for a Sustainable Today. Our world is an amazing, complex living organism, and we coexist in a symbiotic relationship. With this great power comes a great responsibility, a responsibility to ensure the future by taking steps to be sustainable today. And now here are the hosts of Sustainable Today.
Hi, I'm Jean Bauman, and thanks for joining us on Sustainable Today, the show that helps you take action right now to become more sustainable, both at work and at home. We have a pretty hot topic today. It's transportation.
We sure do, Jean. Transportation accounts for 29% of our nation's greenhouse gas emissions, and that's actually increasing according to the EPA. Now, I sold my car 2 years ago,
Wow.
and now I rely on the bus, my bike, and some car sharing. But I have to admit that I recently flew back to the East Coast, and I've learned that while air travel accounts for about 2% of emissions, that the actual impact on climate change is much higher, like 4 to 9%.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
That's incredible. I didn't know that. But you know, I too dropped my air travel a couple of years ago because I found out how much my carbon CO2 footprint was all based on air travel. So I dropped a whole bunch of that. And I'd like to be using the bus more in public transportation, but the nearest bus route, 3/4 of a mile from my house, and it's up a really steep hill, and there's no place to park, so I'm not doing so good on that.
You need good shoes for that.
Well, the good news is that there's all kinds of other ways to reduce your carbon footprint and to be a whole lot better with making different choices around transportation. The bad news, we both still have a carbon footprint because our society hasn't weaned itself off of fossil fuels yet.
Well, at least we're both taking steps to reduce that carbon footprint, aren't we?
You bet.
And today, Rex Burkholder, the Metro Councilor from District 5, is here to tell us more about this region's transportation plan. Welcome, Rex.
Thank you.
Hey, Rex, you've developed a real expertise and interest in transportation since becoming a Metro Councilor. So what's so important to you about that?
Well, it actually started before that because I was an activist in my neighborhood, concerned about the quality of life in my neighborhood. And also I'd like to ride my bike. And one of the things I noticed, this is 20 years ago almost now, that it's really difficult to ride your bike, and very few people did it because of feeling of not being safe. There weren't bike lanes back then. There weren't accommodations. Most of the bridges across the Willamette River had very narrow sidewalks, hard to use, and they were dangerous actually.
Right.
And so I started the Bicycle Transportation Alliance back then, and slowly, through being an activist, gained geekdom in transportation, and realized, you know, one important thing about transportation is it has huge impacts on all our lives, not just the environmental issues you're talking about, but on health, on access to opportunity or lack of access thereof. Lots of issues that transportation affects our lives, and it is the #1 public investment in our cities over everything else.
I can't wait to find out more about your opinions about that, and I had not realized that you were such an activist 20 years ago. I wish I would have known you then. But I want to make sure that we get to some of the news items here. And for those of you who are from outside of Oregon, Metro, we've mentioned you're a Metro Councilor. Metro is a regional governing body for the 3 counties in this region, about 25 cities, and that covers 1.5 million folks. So there's a lot of transportation issues just related to the region because of our size. Yeah. So we also have a couple of really great spotlights to share that we'll tell you about when we get to those. But in the meantime, Will, what's going on in the news?
Well, I found a couple of really interesting things in the news this past week. I learned that with the number of electric vehicles that are being manufactured, there's going to be a dramatic increase in the number of those vehicles. And you would think that's a good thing, but actually there's a little bit of concern that these plug-in hybrids are going to overwhelm the electric grid. And I saw on Green Tech Media that there's actually an opportunity here that might not occur to you. Electric plug-in hybrids could actually function as big batteries. So when they're plugged in, they store the energy, and at night, when wind energy is typically being generated and demand is the lowest, they can store that energy. They can actually store, if just 1/4 of America's cars went electric, they could actually store more energy than what's produced by the entire nation's electric grid.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
And then they'd be a backup source during the day when demand is at its peak. This is called vehicle-to-grid technology, and it's probably years away, but it's a great example of the possibilities that may emerge from a more intelligent transportation system.
Oh, cool. Now we're going to ask Rex about intelligent transportation systems in a little bit. And I have a story from The Guardian in the UK. And this is a story from, I think it's pronounced Lunen, Germany, that claims that they are going to be one of the first cities in the world to build a dedicated biogas power plant and network, an underground piping system. Now what they're going to do is they're going to fuel that with, well, cow and horse manure. Okay, we'll just say it. And other farm waste, and they're going to use that then for their 90,000 residents. Now the heat and the electricity generated in that combined power and heat plant, that's going to be piped underground and provide about 30 to 40% of that whole city's requirements. Now here's what I was thinking, and that is as soon as the plug-in electric car gets to be really popular, this will be like the 21st century of a horse-powered vehicle. Okay, horse-powered, horse manure.
Well, speaking of horsepower, so also in Europe, German automaker Daimler recently acquired 10% of Tesla Motors. That's a Silicon Valley startup that produces the Tesla Roadster. And this gives Daimler access to Tesla's advanced lithium-ion battery technology. And if you haven't heard of the Roadster, it's that technology that enables the Roadster to travel more than 200 miles per charge, accelerate from 0 to 60 in only 3.9 seconds, and get the equivalent of 256 miles per gallon. The car also costs $110,000, by the way.
I think I'll wait until a few years from now to purchase.
Well, Daimler, the good news is Daimler's already testing this new battery technology in their Mercedes and Smart brands and plans to offer electric vehicle versions of every Mercedes by 2012.
Wow.
So pretty soon we'll all be able to get plug-in electric hybrids.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I did last year is I bought a hybrid. And, you know, there's a part of me that wishes I would have waited for that hybrid, that plug-in version. Right. But, you know, just trying to do my part.
Yeah, you're doing a lot better today. I think you're contributing today rather than waiting.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think given that, let's go ahead and jump back in with Rex and talk a little bit about innovations here in the region, because transportation is a big issue around the world, but I'd just like to get this a little bit more local. So with all that which is going on out there, let's talk about what's happening with Metro. Because one of the priorities at Metro is the Regional Transportation Plan. Now, that's the 2035, so future vision, and I'm pretty sure that that's grounded in the 2040 plan for the region. So could you tell us a little bit about what those two things are, how they're connected? What that
well, this region's a little unique in the sense that we've been charged by the voters, as actually in the charter that was passed in 1992 for Metro, was to develop a 50-year plan for the region. And that's a little over 10 years ago, and we're right now updating that 50-year plan, which is a vision of sustainability, actually. It's how do you preserve the quality of life for the people who live here and in the future? And there's all the components to it. Where do we grow? How do we grow? How do we provide the infrastructure, and transportation being a key part of that? And in addition to being federally and state required that we coordinate all our transportation spending in the region, the 25 cities, 3 counties, ODOT, TriMet, all the different acronyms you have out there, right?
But it's a requirement to coordinate.
It's a requirement to coordinate. Oh. And then Metro, because we have this independent elected government, actually we add value to that by having this, connecting that into our vision of the future. And so that's the really key thing, is how do we become more sustainable as a region. And that includes a lot of components, but transportation, as you said earlier, is a major impact, has major environmental impacts, has major impacts on people's health and quality of life. So it's an important piece to fold into that 50-year plan. We're right in the middle of updating that 50-year plan, and also it's just the timing is the same timing that we're doing the transportation plan. So we're trying to make sure that it's all serving that vision, that 50-year vision, and so transportation is a piece of that.
So you're updating both the 2040 plan as well as the 2035 plan, which is the transportation piece.
Yes. Well, think about the regional transportation plan is kind of a state bureaucratic, let's say, regulatory requirement, which is for good purposes, to make sure that we actually spend our money wisely. And it happens to coincide with us updating that 50-year plan. Of course, it won't be the 2040 plan anymore, because 50 years from today will be 2060 when we're finished. So it's the idea, it's this rolling update of that plan, and transportation being a key component of it.
Okay, you must have a very thick calendar. Right, to cover all those years.
No, it's all on a handheld web thing, so it's thin, but it's busy.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned kind of this 50-year rolling plan, because my next question has to do with Copenhagen, because Copenhagen had this 40-year vision for its transformation as a city, and they use what's called a balanced centered development approach. And in essence, what they did over the 40 years is they went from hardly any bicycling to like 38% of daily commutes being by bicycle. So I'm just wondering, is that a vision that our city or our metro region might be holding? And if so, what could we learn from them? And if not, do we still have lessons that we can learn from
Well,
them?
we can learn a lot. And that's one of our main things we do, is go out and steal good ideas. And just this last fall...
As long as you aren't stealing bikes.
No, good ideas, right. Last fall, we actually, as part of a investigation about bicycling and walking and how to improve that and getting a higher mode share being a key part of that, we actually took a group of people over to Copenhagen and Amsterdam on a German Marshall exchange program.
Nobody asked me if I wanted to go.
It
Wow,
was
that
fun.
sounds great.
But we were on bikes the whole time working.
No kidding.
But we met with elected officials, we met with transportation professionals, and we actually investigated this question, is how did you get there? And it was a very conscious investment strategy. And looking at the impact of the automobile, and I think we'll come back to this when we talk about electrical, it's not just greenhouse gas and energy consumption. It's also the impact in terms of space, the land that you use, in terms of health and safety, that even if we do come up with a clean running vehicle, it has other impacts as well. So that was their thinking, was they were starting, like we did, starting to talk about tearing down parts of cities to build roads. And the people, actually, in the 70s, there was quite a big demonstration in Copenhagen. They filled the town square. There's 50, 60,000 people on bicycles. And they said, preserve our way of life, preserve our cities, and let's do a different way than what we've done in the United States. So what we've learned from that is that you can make it happen. Normal people ride their bikes. They don't see themselves as cyclists. They just say, well, I'm using my bike today. And so I think we're looking at, and it's very parallel to what we're talking about in terms of developing centers that are in your neighborhood or close by where your jobs are, your services like libraries and post offices. So trips are short, and if we make the roads comfortable for people walking and biking, they'll use it.
That should do it. You know, the other thing that this brings to mind is you've mentioned land and health and safety. Also, the economy. The economy starts to become more localized. You know, it's more compact.
For sure. Well, you support those local business because you get enough people living in the neighborhood and able to get around that neighborhood, and then they support businesses, the grocery stores, coffee shops, and everything else. And there's a ability for people to fill those niches in those markets.
I've just realized there seems to be kind of a tension, a little bit, not really tension, but a contrast between going back to these kind of old modes of transportation where you've got walking and biking, but then, you know, very kind of high-tech forms of transportation in electric vehicles and whatnot. And I wanted to ask you about something that we found on the website, intelligent transportation systems. So that sounds so high-tech. I want to understand what that is. And then how do you kind of how do these coexist? How do you have something that's so kind of old school, like biking and walking, with something that's so futuristic?
Well, you haven't seen my bike yet. No, but the technology obviously makes biking easier as well. You know, having things like an 8-speed internal hub can make it very easy for people to travel around.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
No, those kinds of technology. But intelligent transportation systems, how we use it today, is actually wiring up the transportation system, and it ranges from having your traffic signals timed to the same way, so you don't stop and start because they're set on auto. You know, they used to be set on clocks. We're not set at all, and now you have them all tied. Not all of them, but we're working to get all of them tied together. Meters or ramp metering with lights. That is actually dynamic. It changes based on how much traffic is going down the highway. And so you get a slower traffic, you let less cars on, traffic speeds up, you let more cars on. And a key thing there that we're using it for is that we basically have the transportation system we're going to have in terms of road system.
It's just the infrastructure.
Yeah, it's just very expensive, and also it has big impacts on local neighborhoods if you put a new road in or expand a road much bigger than what they are today. So that's what we have. So how do you use it better? And that's a big part of intelligent transportation systems. We also use it the buses. I don't know if you've seen the little, on top of many signals, there's a little thing that sticks up, and that's actually a receptor.
So the transit tracker?
Yes. And so if the bus is running late, they can push a button, and it'll hold that signal a little bit longer so the bus can get through that signal, not wait
that's
that light.
fantastic.
Oh,
Wow,
here
cool.
I was thinking it was a camera to watch.
I can't tell you how many red
trucks
lights
use it
I've
too.
run.
Yeah,
not
thinking,
run
oh my
because of
God, am
that.
I going to get a
Right.
picture of?
Yeah, oh, there are cameras out there too. But all those are parts of the intelligent
It's
transportation
all data.
system.
I mean, it's
And safety.
Really interesting.
You know, cameras are, red light cameras are good for safety.
I want to move on to one thing that we want to get into, which is the planning effort in freight and goods movement, because I know freight is such a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. What are the issues that you're trying to address there, and how is the plan going to treat that?
Well, what's really one thing I've learned, and this is something I have learned in time on the council, is that because we are a port city, and there aren't a lot of port cities in the country, and we are one of the few places where there is a sea level crossing of the mountains between us and the rest of the country. And so we are a critical transportation corridor. And so there is that freight movement by rail, by water, by truck that comes through here much greater than what would be the number we'd have because of a population of 1.5 million people. So that's a key issue. One thing that we found out earlier when we started this process, and the business community really pushed on us, saying, what are you doing for the business community? And a key issue is how do you move goods around? One part's moving people, then the goods part. And the goods part was, they got us to do a study of this, looking at how things move, where they go, where's the most important places for freight. And what we discovered is that most freight goes to some very specific locations, which allows us to make strategic investments to help those warehouse areas, those industrial areas, connect into the system better. It's not like every street needs to be wide enough for a 80-foot truck and trailer to turn a corner. It's very specific areas where the freight goes. And so that is a key piece of it. We're also advocating for a national rail policy, because freight rail could carry a lot at a much lower environmental cost, but it's full. But it's a private system, and we haven't invested into it publicly very much at all for the last 100 years. So we're looking at that too.
So that's a piece that's going to get wrapped into the 2035 transportation plan.
Yeah, and also in our lobbying, we go back to the East Coast and lobby in D.C. with Congress to say, here are the things that you need to do. We can't do this. We're one little city. It's a national problem. We need you to invest in that.
Okay. You know, there was this great little story on the website around what exactly happens to a coffee bean. So for any of you who want to learn what happens to the transportation of a coffee bean, go to the Metro's website, because it's a real cool explanation of that movement of goods throughout the city. So it was informative from my perspective.
And that's OregonMetro.gov.
OregonMetro.gov. Good. Well, we were talking earlier about moving people, and the way most of us move ourselves is by car. But to really improve the transportation picture, it's important to reduce the number of cars our infrastructure has to accommodate. Now, one way to do that is by public mass transit, but sometimes that's not always practical. So a few private companies have jumped into the fray, offering chartered alternatives to using your car or the bus. Now, one such company is EcoShuttle, and as Lisa Bell informs us, this isn't your ordinary bus.
Get up in the morning, get on the bus. Get up in the morning like the rest of us. Places to go, important people to meet. Better not get up or you might lose your seat. Bus rider.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bell, and I'm here today with Fiona Mitchell of EcoShuttle. Hi, Fiona. Nice to be here today. So I heard this rumor that EcoShuttle started out really small. You were running it out of your bedroom. There were 4 buses outside.
Yeah, we had a 1-bedroom apartment. Basically, we moved Eco Shuttle office into the bedroom, and we slept on the pull-out couch. And all of the buses were parked outside. So
outside of your apartment?
On the street. So we decided we needed to move to a bigger place.
So what was the idea behind Eco Shuttle? How did it start? Who is Eco Shuttle?
Well, at the beginning, it was just an idea of a green airport shuttle. Portland is such a good sustainable city, but there really aren't any sustainable transportation options. So we decided to put that into place. And then we thought, you know, there are a lot of people who commute to work in their single passenger vehicles that commute alone. That creates a huge backup on the highways, not to mention puts a lot of carbon dioxide, among other things, into the atmosphere. So we thought we'd do a commuter shuttle.
We all work at the zoo, and since it's very busy during the summer, we need space for some of our patrons to park. Hopefully a lot of them take the MAX. It saves some gas, it saves lots of parking space. And we have signs all over the zoo. All of our patrons know that we try to recycle. We have some little electric cars that go around the zoo now. We're trying to do what we can, and I'm very pleased to be working for an outfit that cares about that sort of thing.
This morning we were on the shuttle up in Forest Heights, and I understand that that's one that's actually sort of bought and paid for by the neighborhood association. Can you explain to me how that works?
We basically make it easier for people to use public transit. Commuters catch the Eco Shuttle in the morning, ride it down to the MAX station, take the MAX station to wherever it is that they're going, usually to work, especially early morning. And then some of them actually catch it at places like Orenco Max, and they get on the Eco Shuttle there and take the Eco Shuttle the rest of the way to work.
I think it's great. I mean, it makes it so much easier, and it's nice to know that everybody's not driving and emitting a lot of whatever into the atmosphere.
That's good. And do you take this for work as well?
I do. I take it every day, both directions.
It's just cool that we don't have to drive everywhere. We just walk like to the bus stop. It's only like 5 minutes away, and then we just get on the shuttle, and it takes us to where we need to go.
I'm happy to be working here because it's provided me the feeling that I'm contributing to a solution, because this company builds in an outlook of sustainability into its operations, both within its office and within its transport services. We're trying to tread as lightly as we can, use our resources as wisely as we can, and as conservatively as we can, basically in an attempt to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
We're going to be putting in rain barrels at our office. We've got a compost bin now. Basically, every month we're trying to do something else to add to our sustainability and hopefully someday make us completely carbon neutral.
The buses have a special fuel feature. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, they all run on 100% biodiesel, made from waste grease and waste oils. So there is no seed crop being produced just to fuel our buses, and then being shipped across the country or being shipped across oceans just to go into our fuel tanks. We have our own fuel tank on site, so when drivers come back from their daily routes, they just fill up the buses on site, and then the bus is ready for the next day.
This is Will Sampson, one of the co-owners of Eco Shuttle. What are you doing here?
Well, I'm fueling our vehicle with the 100% biodiesel.
So I'm looking here and I see that this actually says not for biodiesel.
That is correct. This is a Mercedes engine inside this vehicle, and the studies show that even though biodiesel doesn't cause harm and is good for the environment, they're not going to back the warranty up by using biodiesel, so they put this statement on the tank. We've gone 70,000 miles in this vehicle and haven't had a problem yet.
So you voided your warranty, but you're great. You're just going down the road.
That's correct.
So can you tell me a little bit about what sort of incentives there are to operate a business like this?
Through the state of Oregon and the Department of Energy, the Business Energy Tax Credit allows us as a company to save on taxes using alternative fuels and carpooling / shuttle services. It's not only a great tax incentive for us as a business to save money, but it saves money for the consumers as well, being socially responsible to the environment and to our transportation industry.
Fiona, is this one of your bigger buses
here?
This
is our newest bus, and it is our second largest bus. This is our 31 passenger. We also have a 17 passenger, a 25 passenger, an 11 passenger, and a 9 passenger.
Okay.
We also have a school bus, which is 48 passengers.
So just private individuals or groups can actually charter this bus to go wherever they want. So what are some of the places you've actually taken the bus?
Well, we've taken it to the gorge. We've done a lot of tours of the gorge. Taken it down to wine country.
Good morning, Mary. Bus people. Bus people. Bus people. Eco bus people. Black and white. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Eco Shuttle.
Thank you.
My name's Randy. I'm your driver. Beer and water in the ice chest. Have a good time.
Thank you. Bye, Eco Shuttle.
We added entertainment services on the side as a supplement and keep the buses running during the weekends. A lot of people really enjoy our drivers. They really enjoy the fact that we're carbon neutral. We have several marketing programs, so people who commute on an Eco Shuttle daily can sign up as a frequent rider, and then they get a point for every day they ride, and they can cash in those points towards things like wine tours or another tour service or something.
Oh, nice.
So how'd you guys like your ride?
Very nice. That was very nice. The scenery was beautiful.
I had heard from some other people that have used the Eco Shuttle. They said they were just wonderful. It's just the right way to go. They're reasonable, very pleasant people to work with.
Well, I hear that they run it on vegetable oil, and I believe that to be very admirable, particularly in this day and time when we need to be very conscious of our environment. And to know that Eco Shuttle participates and finds entrepreneurial ways to operate their vehicles in that manner. Put us all in one vehicle, also got to keep it condensed and save on individual fuel by taking individual cars up there, so another way to further the thought.
So, Fiona, you're doing great today. What do you see for the future? How do you see your company growing?
We definitely like to partner with more nonprofits so that we can offset some of the carbon output that we do have. Right now we've got a fund set aside to purchase carbon credits, but it would be great to partner with a local company so that we can do that on a local basis and really see the change here. So we're trying to make as many small differences now as we can, and then later on, as we get bigger and have a greater revenue source, we can really start purchasing some bigger things to make us a little bit more sustainable.
It's been great being out here with you today, Fiona. We think Eco Shuttle is doing a great job. Thank you so much for having us here and for letting us ride on the shuttle this morning.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. I'm Lisa Bell, bringing you the tools to be sustainable today.
Leave the house at 6 o'clock to be on time. Leave the wife and kids at home to make a dime. Grab your lunch pail, check for mail in your slot. You won't get your check if you don't punch the clock. Bus rider.
Well, the Eco Shuttle looks like a great way to get around when walking or biking isn't the answer either. I especially like the pub crawl idea because it probably makes the streets a whole lot safer, and it certainly looks like a lot more fun.
Yes, looks like it.
Okay, Rex, let's talk about the personal vehicles. You probably heard us talk earlier about the Tesla Roadster. And these are performance-focused innovations in passenger cars or personal vehicles. Do you think those are going to help, or are those kind of just an indulgence for the wealthy?
Well, probably both, to tell the truth. You have indulgence for the wealthy, but that is pushing innovation. You have a market that, like you mentioned earlier, the lithium-ion batteries they developed and that they have the patent for is really an important advance. And we can use those in different vehicles and such. There are, though, the issue, I think, of looking at personal vehicles and the other impacts of personal vehicles, because a traffic jam of Teslas will still be a traffic jam. And so we do need to look at a fully balanced transportation system and look beyond just the fuel issue, because there are other impacts, especially in urban areas.
What I like about the Tesla is that I would think performance vehicles are some of the worst offenders when it comes to fuel consumption, and not just in terms of their miles per gallon, but also just how often they're driven, how often they idle. And so at least now there seems to be, or starting to be, alternatives for people who really want performance. So I would think they'd make a disproportionate impact on reducing emissions. What do you think?
Well, sure, and there's a man here in Oregon who actually has an electric-powered drag racer who always wins.
Really? Right. And they don't have to go through gears, do they?
Yeah, they just go direct drive. But again, it's what the technology transfer will happen. And that's what you're looking for. And it's always been that. The Wright brothers, okay, you know, they started out as a bicycle mechanic. They got into cars and they played with airplanes. And that's where the technological innovation came from. And then that gets transferred into the humdrum every day. How do I get from here to there? Electric bicycles, you know, they're becoming much more possible now that you have these lightweight batteries.
Right. Exactly. I just saw one at a little convention, the water and energy expo that we had at Lake Oswego. It was really quite cool. Yeah. Hey, you mentioned, you know, that there's, you know, fuel isn't the only issue around transportation. As a matter of fact, I was thinking that there's several big issues around transportation. Of course, the first one that comes to mind is fossil fuels and climate change. And I'm just going to list these and then we'll come back to them all. Secondly is around population growth and that shift of the movement of goods and services and people. And thirdly, you mentioned earlier, was health, you know, the jeopardization of health from not only the pollution, but even the climate change connection there. And fourthly, not a lot of people talk about this, but invasive species, because one way invasive species come in is through modes of transportation. So let's take each one of those and just, you know, give us your snapshot on each. So let's start with the fossil fuels.
Well, a real snapshot there, it's actually, you talked about CO2 in general, okay, fossil fuels are being a part of that. But one thing that through our past actions in this region in terms of looking at how we use our land, we actually have policies that had make sure that there are multifamily housing zoning in every community so people of all incomes can live in a community. And we also have very consciously tried to make sure that there's land for employment and commercial activity near people's homes, which is totally different than the pattern post-World War II in the United States, where there's your subdivision over there, there's your commercial area over there, and in another town is where the apartments are because we zoned them out. And what we've seen is actually we are complying with Kyoto Protocol right now. The CO2 emissions are per person are actually are at 1990 levels in this area, despite the fact we've grown by 25% or more.
In the whole metro area, not just Portland?
In the whole metro area, because Portland does the analysis, has done the analysis, but we've done it now. And most of what they claim credit for is the fact that people are driving less. And then there's a little bit about making houses more energy efficient, and there's a little bit about planting trees, but most of it, the bulk of it, is just the fact we've seen a major drop in how much people drive in this area. And it's not because they're giving up their car necessarily, but the trip to work has dropped by 30%, from an average of 10 miles in 1990 to 7 miles. And that's a land use decision. So these things are very related.
Right.
But if we're back to 1990 levels, then why do we need a 2035 plan? I mean, isn't the problem solved?
Yes, yes, of course.
Well, that brings me to population growth and urbanization. So let's shift to that.
Well, where we need to get to, as you probably know, based on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is 80% below 1990 levels by the year 2050, I believe is the number. And it's doable, because that's about a 4% a year drop. Okay, if we wait 10 years, there'll be an 8% a year drop. So that really tells us it's time to start now. And we're ahead of the country. And we're actually being seen as a model, and we're being asked to do work because of our work on land use and transportation, and because that's 70% of the CO2 problem is land use and transportation decisions. And we've shown that you can reduce that. Now we have a lot of work to do. Not all our area is like inner city Portland, for example, where most people can get by without a car if they need to, and many people do because they want to. We need to look at those changes. In population, here's a kind of odd thing that people don't quite realize is that if you have higher densities of people, more people living together, you actually see a drop in driving and drop in CO2 emissions. People live in multi-story buildings, 4-story buildings, apartments, condos. And that's actually where the market's going now. The demand for that is much higher than it is for single family on their own lots. We actually estimate that we probably have 16 million more single family houses in this country than we need, which is part of why we've had this big housing collapse. There's just not a market for it. So as you get more population, you support more businesses that can be in your neighborhood. People in Gresham keep saying, we want a Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe's says, well, we need at least 3,000 people per square mile to make a market for us. Okay?
So
and
you have to get that.
You have people.
Yeah, you have to get that condensed living to justify the investment.
If you direct it correctly, and if you allow it to happen in those kind of things instead of preventing it, which is what we've done, and we've prevented it in the past with our zoning, you can actually be much more ecologically light on the earth per person than if you were more spread out.
Are those people in Gresham eventually going to have to move somewhere more dense? Like, what happens to those farther out communities?
Well, Gresham is changing. One is that there's a lot more jobs out there. And so they're dropping in the number of people who are commuting out of Gresham, both to go shopping because they've been developing their shopping areas, and this is through a metro program called Transit-Oriented Development, where we put a little bit of transportation money into help getting higher levels of development to occur. And so if you go out to the Civic station, the Civic light rail station in Gresham, you will see a new development that's very walkable, very friendly, and then a lot of private development coming up around it that's attracted to that.
Now I've noticed that on a whole bunch of the light rail stations.
Which is one of the big purposes of light rail. It's not necessarily to move people, it does move people from one place to another fast, but also encourages higher levels of development around the stations.
Town centers,
Town centers, yes, and station communities. Streetcar does the same thing. We've seen a major impact of streetcar on the levels of development that occur next to the streetcar line.
So basically we can have a higher population because we'll have an increased urbanization by center by center by center.
Yes, and some of it's because in some ways we don't have a choice. Half of our population growth is natural increase. You know, old guys like me aren't dying fast enough and babies are being born faster.
Stop riding your bike.
Stop being healthy, right?
Stop doing that.
And the other one is, the other half is people moving here. And especially with climate change and the impact it's going to have on other parts of the country, we'll probably see even higher numbers than we're forecasting. And unless you change the U.S. Constitution, people will have the right to move to where they want to live.
So let's get started on that.
Well, you just mentioned health. So could you say a little bit more about the connection between transportation and health?
Well, a key issue is, and it's being recognized by the health community a lot now, and that's helping us in terms of rethinking how we look at our system, is a lot of the diseases now are from a sedentary lifestyle. Diabetes, heart conditions, those type of things are killing more and more people as a percent of people in the country. So getting people so they can walk, bike, that just makes you healthier. Reducing air pollution, a huge one that we have, and it's mostly caused by fossil fuels being burnt in cars. And so you have these sacrifice zones along freeways of high levels of carcinogens and other things. Those are two major components of health that are affected by our transportation decisions.
The term transportation options covers a lot, you know, the biking and the walking, everything we've talked about today. And Metro's, I understand, looking at 55 corridors for a high-capacity transit system, which seems a little inconsistent with some of the route reductions that TriMet has had to do to save money. So what's the overarching plan for transportation options? Is there anything visionary? How do you reconcile these two issues?
Well, we are leading the country in that vision, and how we started out with it was going to the local communities and to interest groups and asking them, what do you want your investment in transportation to get you? They didn't say, let's go from A to B faster. They said, I want to have a healthy community, I want to be safe, I want a job. And so we're trying to design the system around that. We want to look at the environmental impacts as well, which is also their concern. And so providing people choices are a key part of that. Now that light rail study, that was looking at the universe of potential options out there. We're going to be focusing probably on 3 new light rail lines in the next 20 years because of financial conditions. And now we have a competition between local communities to change their zoning, to get more development in their communities so it can support a light rail coming to them. And so it's this community aspirations.
A lot of communities want it.
Yes, and now,
for economic development.
Remember 20 years ago,
right.
you know, and now it's Vancouver, Washington. And they're saying we want to have light rail there. We want to be able to get around without having to be stuck in our cars. Give us a choice.
Great. Wow, that's really interesting.
I like the transformation.
We're going to see a lot of changes, I think, in the next few years.
Yeah.
Okay, well, next up, when you think about all things sustainable, you usually don't think about a giant gas-guzzling home on wheels, but that's except the one that is owned by Ty Adams. When Ty considered the RV, he wasn't thinking why, he was thinking why not. Back in 2006, he sold his house, he quit his desk job, he bought a motorhome and started promoting biodiesel. The idea evolved into what today he calls Soul Trekker, and our Ann Reese dropped in on Ty and the Trekker to give us an up-close and personal look.
Welcome to the Soul Trekker. This RV, according to its co-designer Ty Adams, may be the most eco-friendly motorhome in the universe. So we've come to Northeast Portland to ask Ty to explain.
Hey, Ann.
Hi, welcome to Sustainable Today.
Thanks. You want to come inside?
Thanks for having us.
So welcome inside.
Wow, nice.
Thanks. Yeah.
So you claim you have the world's most eco-friendly RV. Would you say this is true?
I think it's true. I mean, it's hard to say because I haven't seen every RV in the world. The reason that we say that is because we can run this without any fossil fuels at all. And that was the whole point of what we did with this rebuild, was to take a vehicle, and this old gas-guzzling RV that had, was covered in vinyl and had a lot of kind of nasty materials in it from an ecological standpoint, and take those out and retrofit it with more environmentally friendly materials, and then retrofit all the systems so that we could run them on renewable energy. So we've got solar electric panels so that we can run all of the electrical systems inside the house off of the sun. And then we've got solar hot water, so we have like hot sink water or hot shower water. We can go about 3 or 4 days without any sun at all.
So you mentioned vinyl.
Right.
And it appears to be very, very toxic. Can you give me a little information about the toxicity?
Of course, yeah, and I appreciate getting called out. So if you're going to talk about something that takes a lot of fossil fuels to manufacture and a lot of petroleum goes into it, then the plastics industry is a huge issue. Vinyl is one that is made with tons of petroleum, and also a lot of formaldehyde goes into vinyl, and that's what off-gases from some vinyls for a considerable amount of time. So I don't necessarily want to be, sleeping in an environment that has formaldehyde fumes kind of coming off in small quantities for sure, but over the lifetime of your exposure, there's some research that is pointing to cancer, the cancer-causing effects of being exposed to low-level formaldehyde for a long period of time. We've got a bamboo floor here, so we're pretty much wrapped in bamboo right now. Eventually, we'd like to experiment with some cork flooring, which is, this is what this is right now. We're using this as a temporary until we get our recycled glass tile, and we're going to do a little glass tile backsplash. So that just shows the cork. Cork is a really cool material, actually. The trees don't need to be chopped down to harvest it. They just peel the bark off every couple of years, so the same tree can yield just tons of cork. So this really cool countertop we just had installed, and it's from a company here in Portland called Fuse, and it's like 80% recycled material. This is actually curbside recycled glass inside there. So they add concrete fly ash, and then they add this glass to it, and then they cut it and polish it, and it looks beautiful, and it's just really durable, really great surface. So we're excited about that. And
where's the compost action happen?
So the compost actually happens back there, underneath inside the toilet, and then you see how there's a hinge back there?
Yeah.
If you're really excited about the waste issue, here we go. So when there's actually waste in there, then we turn the vent on, and that keeps the odors out of here completely. And then if you want to speed up the composting process, this is the heater underneath there. That will cause a little bit of odor. That's the reason that I would ideally love to have the composting tray below deck, so that it would get rid of any odor and you could have the heater on all the time. And then when the compost is finished, we just lift this guy up here. You take that bag out of there with the compost after it's full and let it finish for a couple weeks, and you're good to go. So this is where the liquid waste goes, right? This goes down to a tank below, and if you're really hardcore, you could add like 8 parts water, and you'd have a nice little fertilizer there that you can put on your plants, no problem. If you're not as hardcore, you can just put it down a regular sewage drain or dispose of it like you'd dispose of of a regular RV waste. Along the top there, you can see we've got a gutter running from the front to the back, a stainless steel gutter, and that's our rainwater catchment system. There's another one on the other side. So when it does rain, it runs off both sides, and water runs inside and down into our tank storage on either side. We've been getting about 75, 80 gallons off that roof. We just use it for shower and sink and stuff, nothing potable. So this is the solar hot water heater. This is a 5-gallon brewery syrup tank that we found a new life for as a hot water heater. So we converted that brewery tank into a hot water heater. And this is the pump unit for the solar hot water. So that antifreeze comes down through this pump and then into the hot water tank and then into our heat exchanger and then back up to the roof there. We've got a little thermostat that will control the whole system for us kind of automatically.
What you got up front here?
Well, up front we actually have the engine. It's a 1993 engine that has 8,000 miles on it, and we can run biodiesel in it and have run biodiesel in it 100% with no issues at all. We thought originally that we would go to veggie oil right off the bat, But as things have changed, we've been kicking that around more and more, because pretty much every restaurant in most areas where there's any sort of biodiesel industry or any sort of vegetable oil, the restaurants are starting to get savvy to, hey, we've got a valuable commodity here. We shouldn't just be giving it away. And a lot of the grease renderers too, who make money off that, have clamped down, and they don't want people taking, that's their commodity, they're paying for it, so it's theft to them.
What inspired you to start in the first place?
I got a job at an RV manufacturer called Monaco. They had these travel magazines, and I became the editor of their travel magazine. So I kind of, you know, by necessity had to like open my mind a little bit to the RVing world, and I thought, well man, like here's an opportunity like that has been completely unexplored to maybe make motorhomes in a green way. And I did this crazy project called BioTrekker for a couple years, where I just traveled around the country as a freelance journalist, writing about using 100% biodiesel, and then started doing school tours, and people started getting interested, and then that kind of evolved into Soul Trekker, and we decided that, hey, since we're already doing education, me and a couple friends, like, why don't we make it a nonprofit, since that's pretty much what it is already. And so we did that, and last year we became a 501c3, and now our main mission in life is sustainability education. Rather than having 20 school buses go see a technology display, we can actually bring that to them, and we can do it without any fossil fuels. We're really excited to just be able to come to schools and say, you know, here's a low emissions way to show kids kind of what sustainability is and some practical applications, and the kids have responded really amazingly well. They get it. Kids see the positives right off the bat, man. Adults, RV shows, you have to convince adults. You really do. They see they want to know everything that could go wrong, everything that has gone wrong first, before they'll be convinced that it's a good way to go. We're getting really close to, I would say, complete self-sufficiency on a small scale, and then that can be replicated on a neighborhood-wide scale, and that can be replicated on a city-wide scale, and that's sustainable. Like, self-sufficiency is sustainability.
Thanks, Ty, for showing us the Soul Trekker.
Thank you, Ann. It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you on tour.
Yeah, we'll see you out on the road.
This is Ann Reese bringing you the tools to be sustainable today.
It's all about the healing you get from the open road.
Well, Ty and his group are not stopping with the RV. They plan to collaborate with the Portland Public School District to create the Solar Transition Cafe, a solar-powered food cart specializing in waffles and other dishes that integrate locally sourced fruits and vegetables. So stay tuned for that on a future report. Now, the other thing is, the last time I saw you, Rex, I believe it was at another innovation kind of a thing, the Innovation Forum. And how did you get to this event?
Well, I rode my bicycle, but I'm lucky because I live close by.
Well, you rode your bicycle to the other event too, and it was raining that day, as I recall, as well.
We are in Portland.
We are. Well, on this next Go Green with Gene, I show you a few other things that you can do in your day-to-day life to make more sustainable transportation decisions. So what kind of car do you drive? One like this? Or more like this one? Or how about this? Or perhaps like this one? Of course, the ultimate CO2 saver is biking. And you thought I was going to say walking, didn't you? Well, we all exhale CO2 when we breathe, each and every time. But on a bike, we can get there farther and faster. Now, not everybody can switch to a more fuel-efficient vehicle right away. Thank you. But we can all do our parts to conserve gas and to be more fuel efficient with the vehicle that we already own. For instance, you can take off all the extra accessories that create weight and a drag.
Extra weight? Who said that?
Not that kind of drag, this kind. Like bike racks that you aren't using, and rooftop clamshell containers that you haven't pulled off since your last vacation. This can improve efficiency by 2 to 5%. I check my tire pressure about every month, or around every 500 miles. Bolivia, stop letting air out of the tire. Anyway, properly inflated and aligned tires save anywhere from 3 to 10% in fuel efficiency. Now, according to the EPA, go by the PSI that's shown on the sticker in the front door panel, not on the sidewall of the tire. Now, inside the car itself, I've removed all the extra weight that creates a drag on my driving. Like old phone books and winter stuff that I didn't need once spring rolled around. I probably only need one umbrella, don't you think? Every 100 pounds of extra weight, that can decrease fuel efficiency by 2%. Some people even take their extra car seats out of their cars. And did I mention the sample floor tiles that have been in my car since I remodeled 3 years ago? No, thank you. Oh my, that's about 75 pounds worth. You didn't think I was going to show you my actual weight, did you? The average American drives about 12,500 miles a year. Me, about 5,000. And that dramatically reduces my CO2 footprint. Several strategies help me drive less, like combining car trips. Not in a chaotic way, but in a thoughtfully laid out route to reduce backtracking along the way. I keep a lightweight cooler in the back of my car too, just in case I need to stop at a store and have another place to go before going home. As a business consultant, my office is in my home, but I carpool whenever I can.
Oh, these local
like with my neighbor to the farmer's market, or with a friend to a fundraiser.
Are we there yet?
Or to the beach with my buddies, or to a party with my peeps.
Let's go party.
Now, your own driving behavior can account for some seriously poor fuel efficiency. Let me show you some better choices. For instance, warming up the car. That's a misnomer. The engine only needs a few seconds to really move the oil about to lubricate the parts. According to the Car Talk brothers, for most cars, you can just turn the engine on and go, if the temperature is about freezing. I love this feedback feature on my dash. I can see immediately how my driving behavior affects my MPGs. If I maintain a steady speed, accelerate before I get to a hill, coast to stops, and maybe let up a bit on the gas whenever the engine revs, then my miles per gallon goes way up. When I'm on the highway, going 55 or 60 is definitely more fuel efficient than going 65 or 70. The EPA suggests that these simple changes in driving behavior can improve fuel efficiency anywhere from 5 to 33%. And I turn off my engine when idling, not when I'm in regular traffic like this, but when I suspect that I'll be idling for longer than 10 seconds or so. That's the break-even point for restarting the engine. I use my heater and AC sparingly and at low settings. Running the AC or the defroster on max can reduce your MPGs by up to 25%. A word of warning though, if you opt to open your car window instead of using the AC, it can create significant drag. If you're going at higher speeds, that is. If you're going under 35 miles per hour, it doesn't make that big of a difference. And you can improve your fuel economy at the gas station itself.
Hi.
Hey! Would you fill it up?
Yep.
Thanks. When pumping gasoline, use the slow mode to reduce vapor creation inside the tank itself. And don't top off. Not only is it against the law here, but chances are that itty bit of gas that you're trying to eke out to round up to the nearest dollar, it's actually being drawn back into the station's storage tank by a vapor line, not being put into your gas tank, even though it looks like it is. So you're paying for gas that you're not really getting, not to mention the hazardous spillage that can occur. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thanks for coming in today.
Yeah.
See you again.
You bet. Have a good day.
You too.
Now, some people drive miles out of their way to go to a gas station that has prices maybe 3 to 5 cents lower than everybody else. Well, on a fill-up, they might save, say, about 50 cents. But when you think about the gas and the time that they use to get there and back, well, does it make a whole lot of sense? Probably not. And lastly, keep your engine tuned. A tuned engine can improve fuel efficiency by 4%. check your oil and your air filter at the same time. Did you know that a clean air filter can save you about 10% on fuel?
Looks real good, ma'am.
And you do too.
Aw, shucks.
And of course, there's lots of public transit options, like taking the bus or light rail or even van pooling to work. Your local provider probably has an online trip planner. And for those of you who travel, try some of these. I take the train whenever possible, instead of driving or flying someplace. And I take multi-person shuttles instead of single-person taxi cabs from train stations and airports to get to my final destination. And if I absolutely positively have to rent a car, I rent the most fuel-efficient one that they have. And I hope you'll do more walking with your own 2 feet. And sometimes, you don't even have to do the walking. I'm Jean Bauman, bringing you the tools to be sustainable today. I'm an everyday gal, making my everyday choices count, and you can too. Hey, can I keep you in my garage? I'm a good cook. All right. I think the answer is yes.
So Jean, what did you ever do with those sample floor tiles?
Well, 2 of them became planter tops, and the other 2 I haven't decided. Would you like them?
I might. I could probably put them to good use.
They're yours.
All right, Rex, it's time to wrap up, but we have one more question. So how has the public been engaged in the 2035 Regional Transportation Plan thus far? And from September onward, how can the public become more involved?
Well, as I said before, the public was there right at the very beginning. It was an important issue for us because we knew we had to change how we did transportation planning because the old way wasn't working anymore. And so we went to the public and we asked them, we had groups on health, low-income minority communities, business communities, shipping group, and environmental groups. And we asked them, what should we try to achieve with our investment in transportation? It's almost $750 million a year we spend on operating,
Wow.
maintaining in this, just in this region.
Wow.
So what do you want out of it? And so they said, here's the outcomes we want in terms of health, environment, and et cetera.
And you got a good turnout? Lots of
Yes, we had a lot of
citizen
interest,
involvement?
and then we did a public opinion poll that kind of tested to make sure that what we got from those discussion groups were accurate, and they were there.
That's great.
What we're doing right now, we will be releasing this month, we'll be releasing the draft regional transportation plan for public comment. And so it has pieces on the policy statement, performance measures, what we want to achieve out of this, and also a list of the projects that we hope to build in the next 20 years. And so we want public comment. We'll be having the usual workshops and hearings, but we'll also have a web base that you can go to the web and put your comments into it as well. Because we use a lot of that. We have a citizen involvement committee at Metro
really good.
that makes sure we reach out.
Do you get a lot of feedback through the website?
We get most of our feedback now through the website.
Right.
So, and why don't you give the website one more time?
It's OregonMetro.gov.
Great. Thank you, Rex, for being on the show with us.
It's great. Thanks for the time.
A good appreciation for what's happening in the region. So thank you.
Yes, and ride your bikes.
Absolutely.
Right on, right on. That's it for our show today. To learn more about the Center for Sustainable Today, our events, and our projects, please visit our website at sustainabletoday.org. Until next time, I'm Will Volota.
And I'm Jean Bauman, asking you to make every choice count, both at work and at home, as you become more sustainable today. Good night.
There's a big, beautiful planet in the sky. It's my home, it's where I live. You and many others live here too. The earth is our home, it's where we live. We can feel the power of the noonday sun, a blazing ball of fire up above, shining light and warmth enough for everyone, a gift to every nation from a star. There's a big, beautiful planet in the sky. It's my home, it's where I live. You and many others